Yeah, okay.
Going live. All right, hey everyone. I'm joined today with Raymond Wallman, AirplayDoc. How you doing?
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course, of course. Well, Raymond, how you been doing lately?
Well, uh, I've currently been cataloging all of the pieces of third-party material that I've used in my documentary Airplay, and it's a documentary that is composed entirely of third-party material. So I expected that the copyright laws around it were going to be a headache, and my predictions were accurate. Oddly enough, that my this this whole headache concerning copyright actually ties in nicely with the discussion that you wanted to have me on for.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about Citizens United now. Before we get into that, though, you are doing a crowdfunding campaign currently for hiring a lawyer to go through your movie. Do you want to shout that out or talk about why you think that's important?
Yeah, it is, and if you want, I could. Yeah, I've currently got a GoFundMe Gamergate Gamergate 10-year anniversary screenings. This is to finance the you know to finance the entertainment lawyers to get it reviewed to make sure that I'm not in any kind of flagrant violation of copyright, and to get the necessary errors and omissions insurance that need to get in case if I want to distribute this any further, have any kind of theatrical screenings for it, and whatnot. If you want to, let's see if I could share my screen for this. Uh, yeah,
Actually,
here it.
oh,
Yeah, here it is. It's on Go. It's on GoFundMe. The amount I want to raise is like around $70,000. Thought that it. I estimate it to be around like $70,000 because I would imagine that would take care of the legal fees and as well as all of the labor that I put into this film as and also that number is very close to 69,420 because there is one person associated with this subject that I have no desire of ever meeting. If
Zoe
you
Quinn.
don't know, yeah.
Ah, the owl. Okay. Why don't you
Yeah,
want to meet her?
because because bad things seem to happen around people who get on her bad side.
I agree. That's my assessment as well. Uh, so well,
And also there is the normal Patreon for Metalhead Motion Pictures. All $10 patrons can view the complete Airplay documentary there. You could also see uh, interviews that I had with Honey Badger Radio, Honey Badger Arcade, and a very recent one, me and the writer for Airplay, James Grim Desborough, had on the Eric Hunley podcast. Very interesting guy, very interesting podcast he's got there. He actually reached out to me about this topic, and yeah, thank you to him for having us on.
all right. Well, hey, I'm going to be doing a crowdfunding campaign soon, actually, so I can pay artists for the book and some other expenses too. So related to the book. So yeah, that'll be interesting as well. I'll see how that goes. I have a bunch of people who've agreed to endorse it. I've laid out a lot of groundwork for it. I still need to lay a lot more though.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're here to talk about Citizens United. Now, I'll admit I don't really have an opinion on this. I've listened to the oral arguments and I've listened to the final opinion, the audio version of it. I've not read all of the opinions because they're quite long. If you read all of the opinions on this from the Supreme Court, and I didn't have that much time ahead of time, but I've done a little bit of research on this, and I'm still a little bit mixed. But I think I'm well. Let's just get your take. What do you think of the Citizens United versus FEC decision?
Well, if you would allow me to start with a very different story that oddly enough ties into this subject. It's about how I became what inspired me to make the kinds of media that I want to make, and it was from looks like about 16 years ago today. I watched a TED Talk by the law professor Lawrence Lessig, and let's see, it's called "How the Law Chokes Creativity," and just put it right there with the sound off. And he was going to, and in this TED Talk, he goes into the many different ways that copyright law is out of date and how it is preventing creative people from being as creative as they can possibly be by building on previous culture and creating new culture. And that was something that inspired me a lot. It inspired me to make remix culture of my own, and as you can probably tell, Airplay is a big experiment in just remixing previous culture in order to make new culture, to present something new, not just tell a story, but tell it in a way that is very unique, and that got me interested in are you familiar with the series Everything is a Remix?
No, I'm not.
Everything is a Remix by Kirby Ferguson.
No, afraid not.
Well, I was able Kirby for well, he has a series called Everything is a Remix.
Well, let's just focus on the topic of Citizens United if we can.
Yeah, and I was able to contribute to that. And after it became abundantly clear that to Lessig that he wasn't able to change the laws around copyright without changing the way that laws get passed, he started focusing on campaign finance reform and the ways that money influences the laws that get passed by Congress. And he saw the need for the change in the way that we finance elections. And that led him to write the book Republic Lost, and just finished rereading it today. And in that one, on the topic of Citizens United, he said, yes, it was true. Yes, the ruling that the court came to was perfectly right. That was because the law, according to the Constitution, the law should have no opinion, should have no right to regulate the kind of speech that anyone should be able to say, that that no matter if that may be a private individual, a corporation, or any other kind of group or representative persons, it should not be of any concern to Congress lawmakers what anybody uses their right to speak in what they say. The greater problem that Citizens United represents is the influence that large money contributions have on what laws get passed and what voices our elected representatives choose to listen to. Following that?
So far, I think so. Yeah. So I the movie itself, I think that creating a film or an infomercial, I guess in this case, a really long video, and trying to make that using that to make a political statement, I think that's probably fine. That's freedom of speech. Though I think where it gets muddy is when you're talking about removing all caps on or all restrictions on corporate independent expenditures, right? All caps on corporate money in politics. Um,
Yes.
that's so the decision itself in this specific case of should this specific documentary that was made by this super PAC be allowed to be created and distributed prior to an election. I think that that's probably the right decision. But then but taking that and going as far as possible and saying, well, there should be no restrictions at all on corporate expenditures. I think that that's going probably too far. Or do you think because the reason is that the corporations they do have like freedom of speech rights, yes, to some extent, right? Like there's also like laws that they can't engage in false advertising, things like this. But they do generally have freedom of speech rights, like to a degree. But the interests of a corporation and the interests of voters are probably not the same thing. They probably have a very different set of interests
Yes,
that they're pursuing.
they probably do, and as a number of studies have shown that Congress is a lot more receptive to the needs and concerns of the people who fund their congressional campaign, who fund their campaigns and get them reelected, than they are to the people than they do to the populace that actually elects them. And in some ways that this is kind of a two-way street, as Lessig writes in Citizens United. There was an attempt by Al Gore that when the modern infrastructure of the internet was just getting created, there was an attempt by Al Gore to deregulate a portion of the internet that generally that we all interact with, and many and many members of Congress objected to the motion, and that if this portion of the internet was free from any kind of regulation, if they didn't hold the power to regulate these companies, then there would be no reason why these companies would attempt to would try to attempt would fund their campaigns in order to try to convince them to write legislation that was favorable to them. So it is kind of this it is kind of this perverse dependency where the where the special interests, the large corporations, fund the fund the regular fund Congress, fund the regulators in order to write regulation which is favorable to them, and in turn, the lawmakers, the congressman, receives money in order to write their campaign, to run their campaigns.
Well, they don't get donated directly by the corporations. Obviously, can't donate to a candidate directly, right? Employees who work there can, but what they can do is they can create, they can basically give money to a super PAC, or use independent money, independent expenditures that aren't affiliated with the campaign officially, to basically de facto campaign on their behalf, right? Correct.
Yeah. Yes, correct. Where a corporation can just give money to a super PAC, and they're the ones that support the candidate. And of course, there's also the problem of just incredibly wealthy people who run these corporations their just using their own money in order to help get legislation passed that is beneficial to their business. Where I forget which particular study that that he references, but from what Lessig references in Republic Lost, there is the return on investments for, let's call it, favorable legislation is is several multitudes larger than the amount that a company or a particularly wealthy individual would have to spend in order to lobby a particular lawmaker or congressional representative.
So I do. Do you think there's anything to the? So I'm actually participating in this election. I'm canvassing in real life. I just started doing that this weekend, actually. Last weekend, I guess technically. So I started canvassing, knocking on doors. I'm also a political live streamer. I In this political live streaming space, there are super PACs. Well, one of them at least, right? That is actually working with live streamers right now. A super PAC is, to promote, basically the Democratic victory in this coming election. And at first they weren't disclosing this, but they've since started to disclose it, which I think is good and important. They need to disclose that, to their audiences if they're involved. Um, but I look at all of this that's happening, and I see that our elections are extremely competitive. I mean, at least in the swing states, right? But we do have competitive elections. We have a pretty wild, free for all, like free speech attitude in this country. And is there something inherently wrong with saying that, okay, corporations have the right to spend their war chest, essentially their vast sums of money, in order to influence the outcome of elections, or unions too, right? Corporations or unions influence the vast sums of use their resources to influence elections by changing people's minds, essentially by running campaign ads. Now there is the issue, you brought that up, right? There is the issue of the politicians didn't feel beholden to them, and that was even argued in the Citizens United case. In the oral arguments, both sides basically agreed that yes, this probably does influence politicians' behavior, which probably isn't good. We don't want that to happen. Um, but it's them basically running ads and convincing voters to change their minds and vote a certain way. Like, do we think that that's an illegitimate participation for these companies or unions to engage in?
Me personally, I don't think it's illegitimate. If most people, most Americans, I you can tell, have pretty much made up their mind well before about voting for whomever, and there's very little a campaign ad or documentary can do to change their minds on the subject. It What they're really doing is trying to rope in the very small percentage of low information, uninformed, undecided voters that seem to be the ones that throw our elections every couple of years or so. And yeah, there should be nothing illegitimate about any kind of for-profit or non-for-profit corporation speaking their throwing their support behind or trying to advocate in favor of one candidate or another. It's when when those particular special interests or large moneyed interests crowd out anyone else who crowds out the voice of anybody else, any other legal private citizen from having their voices heard from their elected representatives.
Is that what happened, though?
Not in particularly, and a lot of people have cited the Trump presidency as the ultimate declaration of just how unimportant the Citizens United decision actually was, because in 2016 all of the money was behind Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton and these really big establishment figures, and all the money in the world could not persuade people to vote for these really, let's just call them what they are, establishment goons. And they decided to go with the big, loud, brash, obnoxious millionaire who just flaunted all convention and decided to poke the eye of the establishment. And for a lot of voters that year, voting for Trump was just a poke in the eye to the establishment. Whether they agreed with him on specific policies or not, it was the ultimate fu to the special interests and politicians who have been pretty much ruining everybody's life for the past couple of decades.
That's kind of a weird statement, but I am looking up right now. 2016 election, Hillary Clinton did outraise Donald Trump. Looks like in both normal donations, but also in super PAC money as well. She did have more behind her and did lose. So
Yeah,
in 2016,
she did.
well, I guess she won the popular vote, but she lost the electoral college. But yeah,
Yeah, and Yeah, I would probably I would have things to say about whether or not somebody like Trump is the actual solution to the crisis of faith we have in our institutions. If you follow my ex Twitter account, you could see I have pretty much animosity for both candidates that are on the ballot this year. Some more than others, but that doesn't.
Well, we can talk about that towards the end if you want. But that'd be a whole discussion on its own, I think. So.
Yeah, but yeah. So and one of the one film that I've really wanted to do for the past couple of years is to make a documentary adaptation of Republic Lost that is dealing directly with these issues regarding the law, and I would really like to get Lawrence Lessig involved to try to sort of like make the inconvenient truth, but for campaign finance reform in the form of Republic Lost.
So, what should the restrictions be? Should it be a return to like the BICRA rules, right? That's what like Citizens United was essentially limited in part. They still kept the disclosure parts of BICRA, um, but not the campaign, not the contribution limits, I guess essentially, right? Um, so would that be a return then, where basically they can make what should the policy be? If it's not the status quo, should it then be something like what we used to have? I think the restriction, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or the chat can yell at us, because I'm not 100% on this. But I think the restriction used to be that corporations and unions could advocate for issues. They just couldn't officially advocate for a specific candidate or party. So
Yeah,
they can still talk about like, oh, we oppose this environmental regulation because we think that the coal mine that we are operating will have to lose 200 jobs, and they'll run ads claiming that. But they couldn't say we endorse or we condemn X candidate or Y candidate. I think that used to be the restriction, right?
yeah. No, that used to be the restriction. I don't think that simply going back to that restriction will really help a lot. I think I think there needs to be a fundamental change in the way that uh, campaigns are financed in this country. And thankfully, over the years, this has just become a big advertisement for Lawrence Lessig, but he's been one of the major but persons talking about this issue. You could look up more about it on his I believe it's a nonprofit. His nonprofit's working to help raise awareness around this issue. It's called Equal Citizens, and his solution to the uh, campaign fine to one of the campaign finance issues was actually implemented in Seattle, where in order to fix the funding question, they the city of Seattle started giving away what they called democracy vouchers, which is every citizen gets a voucher from the treasury worth about, I believe it's $100, and they could spend that voucher on whatever candidate they want, on whomever candidate they want, and with $100 given by from however many of voters from in a general given area, that could be more money than is even necessary to finance an election.
Yes,
With like
I've good.
a general cap with individual contributions to like $50 or so, at like $50 or so.
Well, I don't think the cap should be that low for individual contributions necessarily. I think people spending their money, there should be caps, yes, to prevent like the wealthy from controlling everything. But I think that you spending your personal hard-earned money on a specific candidate, I think that that's totally fine as long as you have like reasonable
Giving
caps on it, like a $1,500
Yeah,
cap or $1,000 cap or whatever.
like there should be a cap however much money a politician can take from an individual citizen.
Yeah, but I think that I don't think it should be capped at all necessarily. I mean, sorry, I don't think it should be capped like $50. That's too low. Um, but I do like the democracy vouchers idea. I've heard this before. I haven't like looked into like studies about like how much this like how many people actually use their vouchers, um, or like what are the pros and cons of that kind of system versus having like just publicly financed elections in another way, like having the candidates themselves receive like an equal amount of funding, for instance, or something along those lines. But the democracy voucher idea, like it has like a, I guess, a certain pro is
Yeah.
that it still requires people to actually to pick who they want the money to go to. That way, you don't have like a candidate who just like just runs for office just so they can get the money,
Yeah,
and no other purpose. They still have to like win the support of people if you have the
yeah,
voucher
that
system.
and there's the problem of people who don't have just exactly who gets publicly funded. It can't, who it can't whoever chooses who gets whatever public funds. It can't be arbitrary, and it can't be arbitrary. It can't be, the government can't gatekeep who whomever gets money from whoever gets money from public in order to run their campaign. So that way vouchers seem like the best idea. I Even somebody like Mike Huckabee brought this up a couple years ago. I believe he made his own vi- he made his own video presentation about his concerns over the uh, cost of federal elections. And yeah, and another and the other thing and the thing about publicly financing elections, from what we hear, that now congressmen are whenever they are not do whenever they're not doing their job, their most of their time is going to raising money from uh big money donors. So just having the democracy voucher available will bring their attention back to trying to persuade their own voters of of what kind of legislation will be favorable to them, so that the voters would be the ones to give them their money and whatnot, and instead of just trying to sway the opinions of a few big moneyed con- few big dollar contributors.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that could be an interesting approach, for sure, with the elections. Is there anything else we got Citizens United you want to talk about before we move on to, I guess, the general
Well,
politics and then anything else?
yeah, one of the big complaints about Citizens United is that it also opened the door for foreign corporations to give money to participate in American elections. Participate is a mild word for it, to pretty much interfere with American elections. And that we saw that come out again with the 2016 election, where Russia was buying up ad space, was buying up or were buying up campaign ads for. They were really buying campaign ads for both candidates because they just wanted to sow division among the population. But according to Citizens United, that was perfectly legal, and they were running apparently troll farms where they just had Russian citizens play acting as American citizens
Well,
trying to.
they still do that. Our friend,
Yeah,
our good friend Ian Miles Chung, you know him.
yeah.
He's literally a Russian agent. He works for Russia Today.
Well, that's well, to say that you work for Russia Today, that's not. That's a
That
particular
wouldn't be
news
handled.
organization.
That wouldn't be handled by the FEC, right? Or that wouldn't be. That's not the same thing as buying campaign ads, right?
Yeah,
But
but that's a
but
that
what I'm
is
trying to raise here is that it seems like Russia and probably other players too, but definitely Russia have a very, very, very strong interest in this particular election and probably future elections too.
yeah, but the thing about Citizens United is that the only other that news organization is that it removed the monopoly that news organizations had from mentioning uh, candidates and discussing uh, campaign issues during elections. So, yeah, Russia Today wasn't.
Well, to be clear,
If anything, Russia Today
he
was
doesn't
actually.
disclose this. Actually, he doesn't actually disclose this. None of I don't think any of the Russian bots do, or Russian agents do. He pretends to be an American on his Twitter and
Yeah,
doesn't publicize his Russia Today connections.
though, didn't he originally live in Malaysia
He
and
still
now
does.
lives in Japan?
He still lives in Malaysia, I believe.
I thought he moved to Japan.
He may have recently, but he has. And I'm pretty sure he still lives in Malaysia. I don't think unless there's been news I missed, because unfortunately I have to do a lot of research on this guy because he's a
Yeah, because
clown, and I was gonna
he's
dunk
a
on him, expose
he.
him as a fraud. Actually, I already have done that, but on his
Apparently, he
book.
had to flee Malaysia. From what I heard, and this could just be internet BS, but he had to flee Malaysia because Malaysia's got some pretty draconian blasphemy laws.
No, I think that was fake news because I remember there was there was this fake meme going around about how he got executed. Yeah, it was a meme. He
It,
didn't actually.
it wasn't me.
Yeah. Now maybe
Yeah,
he fled the country because he was worried. I don't know, but
yeah, there was. Yeah, and so there was that with Citizens United. There was the concern that foreign corporations were going to start spending money into trying to influence federal elections. And so another idea that Lessig has proposed is a, and this might be even more far-fetched, is a constitutional amendment saying that only legal U.S. citizens may contribute money to American elections.
I don't think that the foreign governments are primarily operating in a way where they're like donating money to campaigns or even like running super PACs. Now they might be running super PACs. I don't know. They legally have the
Yeah,
right to if they want to, but it seems like mostly what they want to do is operate in a clandestine way, using like social media, for instance.
yeah, but still there is that danger where even in the original founding of the original writing of the Constitution, you know, uh, lawmakers were barred from taking any kind of gifts or holding any station from any kind of foreign governments. That was something that the that was an in kind of improper relation, yeah, improper influence that the founders were very concerned with. And so it might be necessary that we amend the Constitution to uh, restrict further improper influences. And how can you have any other? And what other category of people can you exclude from this kind of influence other than non-citizens? Because who can object to a foreign government paying money to influence an election with a foreign government or an illegal alien, an illegal immigrant, the Chinese, the Russians, whomever, the Saudis, or just uh somebody who came over the border illegally and spending their own money on election. And specifically the wording of only legal United States citizens. This would also bar all for and nonprofit corporations from spending money on U.S. elections.
So what does it mean to spend money
Because
on a U.S. election, though, right? Because do we not think that what does that mean, though, right? How do you restrict a foreign actor? Like, obviously they can't donate to. They probably can't already donate
can't donate directly
directly to
to.
candidates. Yeah, and they probably shouldn't be able to run. I don't know, like super PACs that promote candidates. But like, if the Russian government or Israel or any other government wanted to run like television ads, like trying to convince Americans to of some policy issue that they have an interest in, like a foreign policy issue, should they be allowed to do that? Should Russia be allowed to run ads promoting the invasion of Ukraine, for instance? I don't. Maybe they should, right? Maybe that's a free speech issue, as long as they're not crowding the airwaves out to the point where they're the only thing that people see. But like, I'm not entirely
Yeah,
convinced that they shouldn't be able to do that.
maybe they should maybe they should have the right to do that, and maybe the owners of these television networks should have the right to just to not allow that kind of stuff on the to not allow that kind of stuff on the air. Though I think the laws restricting foreign governments from having control control over what is distributed on American airwaves in has come has really come about has really risen again recently with the debate over tick and just the kind of content that's pushed through this foreign owned corporation. Eh,
Well, to be clear, I'm probably more on the don't ban TikTok side, and I'm someone who TikTok censored for a while.
and-
But it's a nuanced topic, right? Just like Citizens United is. It's a nuanced topic because it 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 probably almost certainly is the case that the Chinese government is influencing what is shown on TikTok. Okay, I
yeah,
think that before the congressional hearings, that they actually show that certain topics are talked about significantly less on TikTok, like the Ukraine war, for instance. But I'm sure there were others as well, I believe. Compared to the Uyghur genocide, right? There's a lot of topics that are talked about a lot
yeah,
less on TikTok than they are on other social media platforms. And I'm sure that's probably not by accident.
yeah. That
So like there, yeah, I don't know. It's a complicated topic. Where do you fall on the TikTok situation?
uh, Well, I don't use TikTok in general because because it is Chinese spyware and all. But should we have? But yeah, that's something that you have to mule over about. Like one person I remember, I don't remember who gave this example, that would we allow a like would we, during the Cold War, would we have allowed a Russian television network that does nothing but push out a, or rather a Soviet television network that does nothing but pump out pro-Soviet, anti-American propaganda? Would we have allowed that to be able to spread, to have time on our airwaves? And I would imagine no.
Well, but I'm not
We
sure
wouldn't have.
that that would have been the right call. Right.
Yeah,
I don't disagree. Like we probably would have censored if Pravda, ran an American television channel. It probably would have been censored during the Cold War. But I don't know if that's like the right call.
that's the right call. And
I don't know. It's a complicated
yes.
topic.
I'm probably on the I'm probably on the libertarian side of this, where it's a where that individual people have the right to decide what they want to consume, and people who, and I should have the right to have access to whatever foreign propaganda that that I would want to watch, even if I'm just curious about it. But there is also an argument to be made that, you know, a foreign country that doesn't respect you, that doesn't that doesn't respect your rights, doesn't respect your laws, has no business operating inside your country. So there's
Yeah, there's arguments on both sides.
yeah, there's
I think
that.
as long as it's all disclosed, like if they were like running a news network that pretended that it was funded by Americans or was an American channel, like that would be like a whole different ball
Yeah.
game because then they're hiding what they really are, right? Um, but I don't know. I don't know if transparency is enough if it's a foreign agent or not. But I tend to lean towards the more libertarian side on that.
Yeah, and that's the problem with Russia Today. They are a very legitimate they are
Well, I
very
wouldn't call them very legitimate, but they.
well, they're a semi-legitimate news network that does at times put out valuable reporting, though whenever the reporting is, you know, is detrimental to America and favorable to Russia, like note like I've noticed that I've had an interest in uh that I do have an interest in nuclear energy, and my first documentary was about nuclear energy, and I've noticed that they put out a lot of anti-fracking coverage, which mainly anti-American fracking coverage, while because the natural gas industry is a big industry for Russia, and anything that would make foreign countries or America or any other foreign country less dependent on Russian energy is a threat to them. So they've put on a lot of anti-fracking coverage, anti-nuclear energy coverage, and I believe two anti-nuclear activists that I interviewed for my documentary have had extensive have been given extensive airtime on Russia Today, but people do have the right to hear that perspective.
So, the coming election, Raymond, what do you think? I saw you tweeted out Dev's video.
Yeah, right right now the hierarchy of candidates in my mind, if we're just assuming, and in all likelihood the Democratic candidate is going to be Kamala, the hierarchy of candidates in my mind is Trump, Kamala, any other functioning adult. And if Kamala wins, that is, it would be better than Trump, but I'm not exactly going to be celebrating it.
Oh, no, I understand. What made you rank it that way?
Aside from Kamala owning slaves or just keeping people as slaves.
What, because she's a prosecutor?
I believe when she was Attorney General, she kept people beyond their sentence in opposition to a Supreme Court decision in order to benefit from their cheap labor, which to a lot of people, unpaid prison labor is the equivalent to slavery. So she kept people who the state Supreme Court said that should have been released. She pretty much kept people as slaves.
What was the specific situation regarding this?
It was I believe it was around the California wildfires, but I don't know. I can't tell you the details offhand. But that is just incredibly that, and there is nothing much she has done that would convince me that she is worthy of the office.
Yeah, I don't know a huge amount about her personally. I generally, of all the Democrats that they could have picked, I would have preferred someone else, I think. But I'm okay with her. I guess I'll still vote for her and campaign for her, but mostly because she's running against Trump and she's the only realistic chance of beating him.
The only realistic chance of beating him
in a two-party system.
In a two-party, yeah.
Like if we had like 7 different parties all competing, right? Then we can. It might be a different story, but
I'm pretty sure that anybody who runs against Trump has a good chance. Anybody who is not, showing any demonstrably clear degeneration of mental acuity has a good chance against Trump because because I believe his support base is maybe very loud and very visible, but it's very small. Is very loud, passionate, visible, but it's very small. People forget that he lost the popular vote in 2016, and it's only because of the Electoral College that he won the presidency, and he lost the popular vote in 2020, even though Biden's failing mental faculties were pretty evident then. And, I don't think he's going to win the popular vote a third time.
I don't think he's definitely not going to win the popular vote again. I don't ever. I don't think. But the electoral college, I don't know. The swing states, it looks like they are close. I'm glad that Biden dropped out. I think that's actually very noble of him to do that for the sake of the country because he recognized the threat. I guess he recognized he couldn't do the job anymore. Um, so I think that that's great that he dropped out,
Yeah.
and I think that Kamala has a much better chance of defeating him. And right now, defeating
Yeah.
Trump's the only real issue I care about because of January 6th, the lead up to it. Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection against the United States. What do you think of all that?
I think there's been reevaluating my thoughts on January. Initially, I said that January 6th, I think you can make an argument that the riot itself of January 6th was not an insurrection because I don't think those people were particularly organized or pretty thoughtful or clear with their intentions
Well,
in any way.
there's like
But
two different groups there, right? There's the average person who went there to see Trump because they wanted to go to his speech. And then
yeah,
there's the specific militia groups like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys that did actually have a plan and actually initiated the attack originally by attacking the police barricades. So like those are
yeah,
like two specific like groups of people. I wouldn't say that like the average person who went there to protest and then broke into the Capitol later on. I don't think that that person's like necessarily like an insurrectionist. I mean, I guess they are. I guess they are an insurrectionist, like in the sense that that's what they ended up doing. But I don't think that they went in that day, woke up that morning, and thought, "Oh boy, I can't wait to do this." But I'm more
yeah,
concerned about Trump's like actions leading up to
yeah.
it than like
But
the individual voter who went in.
but the evidence that Trump tried to submit fake electors and tried to get actual votes overturned, I think that's pretty beyond the pale. And in my view, that the actions that Trump took, not acknowledging the peaceful transfer of power, trying to submit fake electors, trying to overturn the results of the 2020 election, that is tantamount to treason, something that he should have been arrested, tried, and possibly, if at all, executed for.
Yeah, well, I don't believe in the death penalty, but I do believe he should be arrested and tried. Though, with this recent Supreme Court ruling, it looks like the president might not be able to be prosecuted for almost anything. So I
That's
don't know. We'll see how that all plays out. But
not a not very uh not not a very good ruling when you know that, and this is something that that was established under Obama, that through whatever kind of draconian Kafkaesque loopholes, the president has the right to extrajudicially execute an American citizen. So yeah, so when you think that that recent ruling doesn't speak well for that. Doesn't.
no, I need to do like a deep dive into it. Not like I did. I didn't do a deep dive into Citizens United. I just did like a little bit of research into it. I'm
Yeah.
still trying to figure out more about it. Um, but I think the problem with Citizens United is that, to bring it back just for a minute, I promise I'll move off of it. But I think the problem with it is that there's actually like two relatively like reasonable arguments. I think, um, which is a relatively reasonable argument on like both sides. I don't know if that's the case with that Supreme Court ruling though. This recent one, this one might be, this one might be bad.
Yeah, yeah, there is a pretty reasonable take about Citizens United. It's just that it it was made in an environment where the outside influence on elected representatives was already terrible to begin with. The influence of of big dollar interests were already having an an unseemly influence on our elected representatives.
And that probably is like the lens that is the Supreme Court doesn't agree apparently, but that is probably the lens that we should look at it from, the anti-corruption lens, which is that
Yeah.
if we do know that this money is influencing the way politicians act, then that probably is like a serious problem that warrants us doing something about it. Because we don't
Yeah.
really want we don't want our politicians to act in certain ways because they're worried that they're going to have donors pull out, like corporate donors, right? Major corporations, not one individual person who can donate, a maximum of what's the current amount, like $1,600 or $2,500,
Yeah.
or 20. What is it? I don't know the exact number, but election donation limit. Well, it was $2,000. Maybe it's changed. Let's see. Let's just say 2,000 roughly. But like, yeah, that's one individual voter. That's completely different. There's a limit on that. But like, I don't want them to be worried that like, oh no, if I vote against this bill or vote for this bill, then I might not get money from the insurance corporations anymore. Right? That's like a horrible incentive to create.
Yeah, and there's also the problem of of dark money, where the potential of not just not getting certain contributions from certain interests, but those interests contributing to the contributing to an opponent or any other kind of challenge to an elected representatives in either retaliation or for a specific act of legislation, or kind of just or trying to try to influence somebody's upcoming decision on any kind of piece of legislation.
All right, well, Raymond, what do you want to talk about, my friend?
Oh, not much. Was able to. Well, I we talked about uh my my film, how that dovetails into uh discussion of campaign finance reform, and uh how that kind of how my influence in remix culture kind of influenced both these things. Uh,
What do you think of
aside from,
Studio Ghibli? Have you seen any of their movies?
oh yeah, I've seen a good number of their films, though. Right now, what I'm really interested in, have you ever done a discussion on on uh eh, on AI, or specifically AI content generation?
Not specifically AI content generation, though. I did in my GamerGate book interview with Pucka Shop.
Yeah.
He talked about artificial intelligence for like a half hour, and we disagreed. He's very much against it, actually. He thinks artificial intelligence is going to be quite bad for humanity. I'm more optimistic. Oh, Milo Yiannopoulos just confirmed we are on for the 5th.
Oh, real?
I'm interviewing
Oh,
him.
I've don't know what to say about don't know what to say about that.
Yeah. Did you know
But
that
yeah,
this is public. He told me this publicly. It's for a public comment. But did you know that his position is that the Gamergate got Trump elected? Like that Trump would have lost without Gamergate, which I think is ridiculous. To be clear, I don't think the data supports that at all. Or that even the
yeah,
Gamergate people even supported Trump necessarily. Like some of them did, but I don't think that it was a majority.
no, I don't think that as well. I think that Gamergate might have been was a precursor to the wider culture war, which Trump is a massive part in. But yeah, I wouldn't say that Gamergate got Trump elected.
He would. Milo's of that opinion. So we're gonna
I
talk
wouldn't be.
about it.
I would not be surprised.
Well,
I, you know,
he's probably of that opinion because he probably thinks of himself as being the person who got Trump elected. And if it weren't for Gamergate, he might not have blown up. That's probably why he sees it
and
that way. But
I
that's a
think
self-serving narrative. I don't,
I think that Milo is a self-serving kind of guy.
Yeah. I agree. He is a self-serving person.
He's yeah. So if it might be a little too big of a to talk about AI content generation and what it will and how it will influence, the future of just music, movies, television, just any kind of artistic form that will come, just any kind of artistic or human kind of creative act. It will have a tremendous impact on on those things, it's a and it's something that I'm trying to get in on the ground floor on this.
So what's your next project after all this?
I I'm pretty much have my hands in a lot of things. I've been trying to get in contact with Lawrence Lessig's assistant because, as I said, I want to make a documentary about uh, Republic Lost and try to get that off the ground. I want to experiment with more AI generated with more AI generated content and what and whatnot. And I was just thinking of today is that with now with AI, images have pretty much become the new images. The moving image has pretty much become the new have become what words have been for writers. Where and I don't think we see it and I don't think we see it now because with humanity's relationship with the written word goes back centuries, and its development has been a lot slower. But there was a time when there were many where there was a lot of expenses related to writing, and a lot of gatekeepers around that, mostly the church. And with the invention of the printing press, a it was a revolution to some, and to those in power, it was a heresy. and we're seeing kind of not an exact uh, replaying, not an exact similar situation, but with AI generated images, AI generated video, AI generated audio. We're seeing a lot more creatives being able to make to make a lot of interesting concepts that the same way ri- the same way writers are able to write anything that's interesting with a word processor. And so anybody who tries to, and I can kind of see it some of the where some of the anti-AI people are coming. You're not really. I can understand where they're coming from, but anybody who has had any kind, who has any knowledge of the history of the written word, or any kind of knowledge of the history of photography and motion pictures, are just seeing the same arguments pop up again.
I think there's a lot of. I don't really use AI art in any of my stuff. I like real artists. I try to find real artists when I can, when I pay them for their work. But I do wonder if there's a lot of potential here for there to be, yes, like you said, like a democratization of art, but also we're still in the early stages of this, so we don't know like what this would look like, the potential like amazing impacts it could have, or terrible, I guess, potentially too, in terms of the art world. For instance, you're familiar with Star Trek?
Yeah,
Imagine like being able to create like holodeck style programs, or even just movies, right? Imagine you could create you tell the AI, hey, look, I want you to create a movie with these elements in it, and it's able to do so and create like a masterpiece film. Like that would be
yeah,
insane and incredibly like personalized and tailored to the individual person requesting it. Um,
yeah. So, yeah, from my current experiments, if you've got an AI, if you want an AI to do something very specific, to do something very general, that's very easy. But if you want them to do something very specific, that's a lot more difficult. So, yeah, and if there are several Reddit communities you can look up, there's like AI video and whatnot on Reddit, and there are just so many really talented, creative people there who are just putting out stuff that you couldn't have even imagined seeing, like just a year or two ago.
we have someone in chat here. Little
Yeah.
Siberian Bear in Twitch chat says, with all due respect, I cannot respect the idea that AI is to writing like the computer word processor was to pen. There's something incredibly wrong with such a comparison, and saying that the history of the written word is going to be okay with this very anti-human, anti-creative invention that masquerades itself as AI. That's someone from the chat. What do you think?
Anti-human invention that masquerades as AI.
I don't agree with the anti-human framing, to be clear, or the
I'm
anti-creativity framing necessarily.
I'm not even quite sure what they're trying to say. But yeah, if you go on, and finally I get to put my film history knowledge to use. Uh, that you saw the same arguments come around during the invention of the during the advent of photography, during the advent of moving pictures, and it's like you're where people were trying to make the comparison between that and painting, where you're not there. It's like you're not creating anything, the you're just capturing you're just capturing light onto a piece of onto a piece of nitrate, and that's not real. You're not doing anything creative with that, and it took people to it took a while before people started to see film and photography as kind of legitimate art forms that
And
even
video
though
games. But these are
yeah
different medium, though, right? Like
yeah it's a
they're still
different medium.
created by humans, but like whereas the artificial intelligence, like they're presumably at least, it's going to be creating and is creating like paintings, right? It's creating paintings, it's creating stories, it's creating videos in some cases, right? But that's not that's those are it's using mediums that we recognize as being like legitimate artistic mediums,
Yeah,
but it's the creator that's different, right? It's not a human creator.
well
Not
well you can say you can say that, but it is the human creator that is putting in the prompt. And like Kirby Ferguson has the creator of everything has a remix, has a good video on this. What AI is pretty much doing is what hip hop artists have been doing for half a century now, is that they're taking old content, repurposing it, and making something new out of it. So if you take one AI generated image and put it next to another AI generated image and use that to tell a story, that's a form of creativity. You take an AI generated image, put it through Runway's Gen 3, turn it into a video, do the same a couple dozen times, have uh have 11 labs uh produce produce a voice quality, or produce dialogue from its samples of voices, have Suno create a soundtrack. It's all different kinds of, it requires the human to put all of those things together. It requires the human to put all of those things together. And, and the thing about AI is that it doesn't get everything right on the first try. You have to go through a lot of trial and error before you can get the right image, before you could get the right take. And so that is very certainly that is certainly something that an art of talent that requires some kind of discernment, that requires some sort of creativity.
all right. Well, hey,
That might be something for a discussion for another time.
it could be. I just don't. I know almost pretty much nothing about the topic, so I feel like I can't contribute much. Sorry.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on. It was great, and thanks for having me on to discuss this issue that's very important for me, and also thank you for giving me the chance to shill my creation, my AirPlay
Do you want to
documentary
tell
again.
people where you can people tell people where they can find you and find your GoFundMe, or what's it called on GoFundMe? So if they want to Google it
Yeah, let me
or
just
search for it.
bring up the
I don't use Google. I use DuckDuckGo.
yeah, let me just bring up the screen here. It's yeah, it is. You can find me on Patreon at Metalhead Films. The page is Metalhead Motion Pictures, but it's patreon.com/Metalhead Films. There you can see my most recent interview with Eric Hunley on the subject of Gamergate and whatnot, and $10 patrons can view the entire AirPlay documentary, and you can help contribute to the uh, to the massive legal fees that this movie needs for further promotion and distribution at GoFundMe at AirPlay Gamergate 10-year anniversary screenings, and donate there as little. You can yeah, any amount helps with further production. Helps.
All right.
Okay.
Well, yeah. Well, hey, thanks again for coming on. I do appreciate the discussion. I know it's a little bit different from my normal content, but I do plan on doing more research on not maybe on Citizens United specifically, but on court cases in general, like the recent Supreme Court ruling of the president stuff. I don't know if I'll host a panel on that or not. I'll see. But when I look into that more, I might host a panel on that, and could be an interesting discussion. I don't know if you'd be interested in joining the discussion. It'd be mostly other content creators. So,
Okay.
but yeah, thanks for coming on, man, and you have a good night.